Hey everyone, and a massive, warm welcome back to the channel. Seriously, it's so great to have you joining me today. Before we dive into this fascinating topic, I want to send out the biggest, warmest wishes to every single person watching. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, I genuinely hope you're feeling healthy, happy, and taking fantastic care of yourselves. Okay, let's talk about something many of us probably haven't given much thought to: being left-handed. We all know lefties. Maybe you are one. We see them writing with their left hand, maybe playing sports differently. But have you ever wondered if being left-handed affects more than just how you do things? What about how you feel things? It turns out, science suggests that left-handed people might actually process emotions differently than their right-handed counterparts. It's not about being more emotional or less emotional, but about the pathways and processes happening inside the brain. Let's explore what researchers have discovered about this intriguing difference. First, it helps to understand a bit about how our brains are organized, especially when it comes to handedness and emotions. For about 90% of right-handed people, the brain is quite strongly lateralized. This means specific functions tend to live mostly on one side. For example, in right-handers, language processing, like speaking and understanding words, is usually centered heavily in the left hemisphere. The right hemisphere, meanwhile, often takes the lead in processing emotions, especially recognizing emotions in faces, understanding tone of voice, and dealing with the nuances of social situations. It's a bit like a well-organized office where different departments handle different tasks. Now, for left-handed people, things get more interesting. Only about 30% of lefties show this same strong left hemisphere dominance for language. For the other 70%, it's different. Some have language centered in the right hemisphere, and many have language functions more spread out across both hemispheres. It's less strictly divided. This phenomenon is called reduced lateralization, or bilateral representation. Because language and emotion processing are so interconnected, and because the brain is less rigidly divided in many lefties, this naturally influences how emotions are handled too. One key piece of the puzzle is a structure deep inside your brain called the corpus callosum. Think of this as a massive superhighway made up of millions of nerve fibers, connecting the left and right hemispheres and allowing them to communicate constantly. Research using brain scans has shown something pretty remarkable. On average, the corpus callosum tends to be slightly larger in left-handed people and those with mixed handedness compared to consistent right-handers. Why does size matter here? A larger corpus callosum generally means more connections, more bandwidth for communication between the two sides of the brain. This potentially allows information, including emotional information, to flow more freely and rapidly between the hemispheres in left-handers. It's like having a wider, faster bridge between the two halves of the brain. This enhanced connectivity might mean that when a left-handed person experiences an emotion or sees an emotional expression, the processing isn't as confined to just one department like the right hemisphere. Instead, both hemispheres might get involved more readily or communicate about it more intensely. So, what does this look like in practice? How might this different wiring translate to actually processing emotions? Studies give us some clues. Researchers often use techniques like EEG, which measures electrical brain waves, or fMRI, which shows blood flow changes indicating active brain areas, while people look at emotional pictures or faces. What they often find is that while right-handers tend to show a clear bias towards the right hemisphere when dealing with emotions, especially negative ones like fear or anger, left-handers often show a more balanced pattern. Their brain activity might be stronger or more distributed across both hemispheres. For instance, when recognizing emotions, particularly negative emotions in faces, the typical right hemisphere dominance seen in right-handers is often less pronounced or even absent in left-handers. Their brains seem to engage both sides more equally for the task. This doesn't necessarily mean they are better or worse at it, but their brains are simply using a different strategy, leveraging that potentially stronger connection between hemispheres. This difference in brain organization might also influence how emotions feel subjectively and how they are expressed or controlled. Some research hints that because left-handers might process emotions using more distributed networks, they could potentially integrate emotional information with other types of information, like analytical thoughts stored in the language areas, more readily. Imagine experiencing a strong feeling, but instead of it being largely contained in the emotion department, signals are rapidly zipping over to the language and logic department for input. This might contribute to different ways of experiencing or reflecting on emotions. Furthermore, studies looking at mood and emotional responses sometimes suggest subtle differences. For example, some research has indicated that left-handed individuals might report slightly higher levels of certain negative emotions like shyness or fear in questionnaires, or show different physiological responses, like heart rate changes, to stress or emotional films. However, it's crucial to emphasize this is a tendency observed in group averages, not a rule for every left-handed person. The findings can be complex and sometimes inconsistent, highlighting how individual variation is huge. We also can't ignore the world we live in. Most tools, devices, and social setups are designed primarily for right-handed people. Think scissors, can openers, desks in lecture halls, even the way we shake hands. This constant navigation of a right-handed world could potentially add a layer of chronic, low-level stress or require extra cognitive effort for left-handers. Over time, this experience might influence emotional responses and coping mechanisms. Facing minor frustrations or needing to adapt constantly could subtly shape how the emotional brain develops and reacts. While it's hard to measure this precisely, it's a factor many left-handers report and something researchers consider when thinking about the broader picture of emotional experience. It's an interaction between the biological wiring and the environment. What about reactions to emotional situations? Some intriguing studies have looked at startle responses. One famous experiment involved showing people emotional pictures, positive, neutral, negative, and then suddenly playing a loud noise while measuring how strongly they blinked, a basic reflex. In right-handers, seeing a negative picture beforehand usually makes the blink reflex much stronger to the loud noise. The negative emotion primes them to be more startled. But in left-handers, this priming effect was often significantly weaker. Their blink reflex wasn't amplified as much by the negative picture. This suggests their brains might regulate the link between seeing something negative and triggering an immediate physical reaction differently, perhaps due to that more integrated processing between hemispheres. Other research has looked at how quickly people can shift their attention away from emotional stimuli. Some findings suggest left-handers might be able to disengage their attention from negative emotional information slightly faster than right-handers, again potentially pointing to differences in how emotions capture and hold their focus. It's like their brains might process the emotional information effectively, but perhaps don't get stuck in it in quite the same way, allowing for a quicker shift. It's also fascinating to consider how these potential processing differences might relate to creativity and artistic expression. There's a long-noted, though not absolute, correlation between left-handedness and involvement in creative fields like music, art, and writing. If emotions are processed in a more integrated, less hemisphere-locked way in many left-handers, could this contribute to a unique perspective or a different way of channeling feelings into creative work? The ability to perhaps more readily blend emotional depth with analytical or linguistic skills, thanks to less rigid lateralization, might be a factor. Again, this is speculation based on observed patterns, not a deterministic link, but it's an interesting avenue to ponder when thinking about the broader implications of brain organization. Now, a really important point. None of this means left-handed people are more emotional, less emotional, better, or worse at handling feelings. The differences we're talking about are subtle variations in how the brain accomplishes the complex task of emotion processing, often observed at the group level through careful experiments. It's about different neural pathways and strategies. Just like two different routes can get you to the same destination, both brain organizations are effective. An individual left-hander might feel emotions incredibly intensely or be very reserved, just like any right-hander. Personality, life experiences, culture, and countless other factors play massive roles in shaping our emotional lives. The science simply suggests that the underlying brain mechanics might have a different flavor for many left-handed individuals. It adds a layer of understanding to the beautiful diversity of human experience. Understanding these differences matters because it helps us appreciate the incredible variation in how human brains work. It reminds us that there isn't just one normal way to process the world, including our feelings. For left-handers themselves, knowing this might offer an interesting lens through which to view their own experiences, perhaps explaining why they sometimes feel they perceive social cues or react to stress in ways that seem slightly different from right-handed friends or family. It validates that their experience is a natural variation of the human blueprint. For everyone else, it fosters empathy and awareness. Recognizing that someone might literally be processing an emotional situation using a different neural framework encourages us to be more patient and understanding. Communication styles might differ slightly. Reactions might vary. It highlights that emotional expression and perception aren't universal. They are filtered through our unique biological wiring. So, the next time you see someone writing with their left hand, or if you are left-handed yourself, remember there's more to it than just the hand you use. Inside that amazing brain, the dance of emotions might be following a slightly different, but equally valid, rhythm. It's a testament to the flexibility and adaptability of the human brain, finding multiple ways to navigate the complex landscape of human feeling. Whether you're a lefty or a righty, your emotional world is deeply personal and beautifully complex. The science just gives us a peek under the hood at the fascinating machinery that makes it all work. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today. Take good care of yourselves, embrace your unique wiring, and I'll see you in the next video.